Hello there, men, and welcome to the Masculinism Movement channel, a place for men to be men and talk about masculinity and men's issues. I'm your host, Brian Krall, and today I'm going to be teaching you all about sociopathy and psychopathy, which are the third aspect of the Dark Triad and Dark Quadrad in this fourth video in the series, in which we're going to start to really dive deeply into some very dark themes. But before we begin, would you mind hitting that like button for me? Thanks. And now on to sociopathy and psychopathy, which are two different sides of what is called antisocial personality disorder. So the term antisocial, when used here, is not to be confused with a general term of antisocial when we say it as meaning not wanting to talk to others, right? Or, someone who's being reclusive. This is a term used in clinical psychology to diagnose someone who is pathological and whose behaviors towards others can tend to be destructive, hence the term antisocial here. And again, because these are medical diagnoses of personality disorders, I will be pulling any definitions and such from official medical sources, and then going over notes from my research and teaching you the behaviors to watch out for in these people. And keep in mind that these are things to watch out for, not just in women, but in other men as well, who can pose serious safety risks to you, sometimes physically, if they are these types. Now, Psychology Today explains ASPD quite well. Antisocial personality disorder describes an ingrained pattern of behavior in which individuals consistently disregard and violate the rights of others around them. Individuals with antisocial personality disorder may behave violently, recklessly, impulsively, and often with little regard for the wants and needs of others. The disorder is best understood within the context of the broader category of personality disorders. A personality disorder is an enduring pattern of personal experience and behavior that deviates noticeably from the expectations of the individual's culture and is pervasive and inflexible and has an onset in adolescence or early adulthood and then is stable over time and leads to personal distress or impairment. The symptoms, according to the Diagnostic and Symptoms Manual, or the DSM-5, features of antisocial personality disorder may include failure to conform to basic social norms, often in ways that violate the law, repeated violation of the physical or emotional rights of others, lack of stability in job and home life, may go through long periods of unemployment, for example, even in localities or situations where jobs are readily available. Irritability and aggression, may get into frequent fights, lack of remorse after harming someone or their property, consistent irresponsibility, recklessness, impulsivity, deceitfulness. This is something that the symptoms of would generally be present before the age of 15. Right? This would be a lifelong thing from childhood on. And then in a different article, Psychology Today says of sociopathy and psychopathy that, quote, sociopathy refers to a pattern of antisocial behaviors and attitudes, including manipulation, deceit, aggression, and lack of empathy for others. Sociopathy is a non-diagnostic term, and it is not synonymous with psychopathy, though the overlap leads to frequent confusion. Sociopaths may or may not break the law, but by exploiting and manipulating others, they violate the trust that the human enterprise runs on. And that, quote, the terms sociopath and psychopath are confusing because they are often used interchangeably, but they are not synonyms. However, there is a difference. Sociopaths are individuals whose callous, deceitful behavior is shaped primarily by environmental factors such as child abuse or exposure to expedient behaviors in others. Psychopathy is inborn and immutable. Psychopaths are more likely to commit acts of violence. Still, because both conditions lie on a spectrum, it can be difficult to know which terms best apply. And Psychology Today further defines psychopathy as, quote, a condition characterized by the absence of empathy and the blunting of other affective states. Callousness, detachment, and a lack of empathy enable psychopaths to be highly manipulative. Nevertheless, psychopathy is among the most difficult disorders to spot. Now let us talk about the behaviors of the sociopath and the psychopath, respectively. My research on sociopathic behaviors that will help you to detect them is not all that different from the behaviors of narcissists. You should notice some similarities between them. The culmination of my research resulted in the following notes on what to watch out for. The first is that sort of look in someone's eyes. They have that sort of shark eye look. That cold, dead, predatory stare that you see in animals like lions and sharks. This is the first sign that should make the hairs on the back of your neck stand on end, and is your instinct's way of letting you know that you are in danger, that you're basically dealing with a predator. So listen to it and get on guard. Like narcissists, sociopaths think they are superior to everyone else. In fact, they think of others more like livestock or animals that they have no qualms about kicking aside if you are in their way. So they can tend to be overly critical and put others down and talk about them behind their back, etc. And not only are they judgmental, but they're prone to jealousy and scheming, which is interesting because that's something almost all women do in social settings. They can tend to be intense and grandiose, as well as dramatic and aggressive, and more on that aggression in a little bit. They're very cold and emotionless. They may call it stoicism or emotional mastery or something like that, but in many cases, the person simply really doesn't have any emotions. Their emotional brain has very minimal activity for a human being. So they may come off as robotic, and oftentimes when they're displaying emotions, it might seem unnatural or unreal, because it isn't. They're just doing what they feel the situation calls for and telling you what they think you might want to hear. They're very charming and charismatic. They act like your friend when they aren't, which you could tell by little things, like if they don't introduce you to any of their friends. Why wouldn't they if you are their friend? Or if they only get together with you when they need something from you, right? If you call them and they generally don't answer and don't call you back unless there's a good reason to, you guys never really socialize just for the pure sake of socializing as friends do, that is a big sign that they are not really your friend and are only interacting with you when they need to use you for a social utility of some sort. And speaking of friendship, another telltale sign of a sociopath is that they might not seem to have any long-term friends, right? And that might be the reason why they never introduce you to other friends, or they tend to be what you might call socially antisocial. Well, these are all social signals that this person might be sociopathic. Next, sociopaths are not honest people. They're very dishonest. Sociopaths are liars. They'll say whatever they think sounds good at any time, and it doesn't have to be true or not to them. And they will say whatever it takes to manipulate someone into doing what they want when they want something from them. So you really can't trust a single thing they say. And if you catch them in a white lie, it's probably just the corner of an entire web of lies that they've been spinning for you. Which is why as soon as someone proves that you can't trust them by lying to you once, it's safe to assume that much of the other things they've told you have been lies as well. And you should not give them the benefit of the doubt or trust them anymore. Their relationships are based upon exploitation and how they can use others for their own personal gain, even at the expense of others. People are just social utilities to them, like livestock to a farmer. They make their bread and butter by leeching off of and even hurting those who get close to them and put their trust in them. And they can tend to wreak havoc in the lives of those who do that with them. They are master manipulators and will use all manner of coercion, including not only the dark, amoral manipulation tactics that I've talked about before, but even intimidation, threats, blackmail, and physical violence, and will get what they want by any means necessary, no matter what they have to do to you. Because they are master manipulators, like narcissists, they can make themselves out to be something that they are not and wear a very convincing mask. And even become like a different person. They are adept at putting on whatever kind of act they feel any situation calls for in order for them to be most successful in it. And so they will tend to say all of the right things at the right time, and they can talk their way in or out of most any situation. If they do something wrong, they can usually talk their way out of it. These are the types of people who would get called in for a poor performance review and walk out having gotten a promotion and a raise because they, convinced the boss that the reason they weren't performing well was because that position just wasn't right for them, and they were able to talk their way into a better position, perhaps with the use of any number of manipulation tactics or potential, intimidation, or maybe accusing the boss of something that could get him fired. If you're a woman accusing the boss of sexual harassment or rape or something, as they often do, these are sociopathic tendencies. And sociopaths are extremely cunning and basically like con artists. So they may come off as very salesy because of this, and it may often seem the same way a salesman does when he's trying to sell you something. So, watch out for that. If it seems like they are trying to sell you on something, trying to hustle you, if it seems like they're trying to smooth talk you or trying to sweet talk you, if it seems like they're lying to you, if it seems like they are lobbying to you or trying to convince you of something, right? Or trying to get something out of you or get you to do something for them, even though they may be making very compelling arguments, I recommend shutting it down. It's a ploy, and you're probably just a pawn or a patsy for them. So don't get involved in their schemes and start doing them favors. Even if they are being very manipulative, that is actually a especially good reason to just put up a guard and shut down the conversation, right? And try to get away from them. Don't even let them spin you into one of their webs, because they may make big promises and plans for the future that have no bearing in reality, but which they know that you want to believe and can be used as leverage. They don't usually do the things they say they are going to do. They were only bringing it up for the sake of argument. And this is something that, just reading this, I am reminded of every single girl I've ever dated, and probably every single boss I've ever had as well, now that I think about it. It's interesting how saying these things aloud, you have certain memories come to mind. So you have to watch out for that, bosses lording promotions over you that'll never happen, or girls lording a future over you that has no real bearing in reality, because it's just one of many empty promises that she never comes through on, and you know she never comes through on them. They don't usually do the things they say they're going to do. They're only bringing it up for sake of argument. And sociopaths tend to speak in extremes, like telling exaggerated stories, bragging, like war stories, or using overtly strong language, like hateful language for something, instead of just saying they don't like it. And the problem with extreme language is that it can lead to extreme behaviors. More on that soon. Sociopaths often do not respect any boundaries or agency in others, because they don't think that others have these things, because they don't view them with respect and humanity. So, they aren't going to respect your opinions or values. They're not going to treat you with a sense of human decency or respect, unless they really have to, like in a professional setting where they might be judged professionally by others for not doing so, or a social setting if they're part of polite culture, or, are a socialite and part of high society. There's a lot of sociopaths there that will treat others with respect as part of their act as a socialite. But when you are dealing with them, you will start to notice how they don't really seem to respect you. One big sign is that they might not take no for an answer. So yeah, a person can be acting very polite, but if they are not taking no for an answer and not respecting your agency, that is a sign of a sociopath right there, right? Or if they are not respecting your privacy and basically like interrogating you very politely, again, that's a sign of a lack of boundaries, or not seeing that you have boundaries, not recognizing your boundaries. They may often data mine others and try to learn about your vulnerabilities so that they can exploit them. So be wary of people who prod you with personal questions and invade your privacy, which, again, sociopaths do because they don't respect your boundaries. Another thing that they will have a lack of towards others is a lack of concern for others' safety and any negative impact or risks that others might incur based upon their behavior, even if it's just affecting others' livelihood. You see this in bosses a lot. Again, these are things that come to mind when I'm saying this aloud, is like I'm just remembering like just about every boss I've worked for. Another sign of a sociopath is that they're aggressive and pushy and are more than happy to step on others' toes. In fact, they can tend to be confrontational if, others don't like what they're saying or disagree, or don't want to tolerate them being pushy or aggressive. They are constantly pushing their limits socially because, again, they don't recognize boundaries the same way that most people do. Sociopaths are very domineering and authoritarian, very controlling. They're the types of people who seek to control others just for the sake of being controlling. They will try to take control of the situation and micromanage everyone and everything involved just because it makes them feel powerful and validated. And they do not have very active empathy centers in their brain, and thus they have a complete and utter disregard for the feelings of others. That is why they don't respect them, don't treat them with decency. It's because they literally do not understand that others have feelings, because they themselves do not. So they can tend to be hurtful, both emotionally and otherwise. And not only will they feel no guilt or remorse about it, but in fact, some of them may actually enjoy inflicting pain upon others and be quite sadistic. And that is, in fact, a sociopathic trait. And I'm also going to be taking a deep dive into the topic of sadism in the next video. But even if they don't enjoy inflicting pain on others, at the very least, they don't care about the harm they are inflicting upon others. And this is because, since they do not have very active empathy centers, they do not see others with humanity, as I said before. So they really do not value human life. All right, like you could die and they wouldn't even care. All right, you could die badly and they wouldn't fucking care. All right, whatever happens to you, they do not care. They look upon mankind the same way they look upon livestock at a farm. Even if you are close to them. I mean, livestock on a farm thinks they're close to the family that eventually slaughters them. They think this family takes care of them. That is how a sociopath or a psychopath looks upon the people that are close to them, even if they seem to care about you. It is only because you are useful to them, right? And they are going to use you until you are all used up. And then the next sign is that they are adrenaline junkies and are high sensation seeking and excitement seeking types. So trouble seems to follow them around because they are troublemakers. They can't stand getting bored and having to focus inward on the dark, empty void within themselves. Bottomless pit they call a mind, and the black hole of a soul, and all of those dark, scary, traumatic memories from their childhood. So they tend to have addictive personalities as they live for constant stimulation. Sound like anyone you know? Well, they may be a psychopath. They also have low impulse control and are often erratic and unpredictable and can tend to be reckless and irresponsible, sometimes seeming out of control and like a loose cannon. These behaviors can range from, being an unstable but generally fun, spontaneous person who is also annoyingly flaky and flip-flops a lot, so, that sucks, to behaving with reckless abandon and engaging in risky behaviors and acting crazy, causing conflict and trouble, and maybe committing crimes or having a destructive impact upon others. So basically, wherever they lie on the spectrum, they tend to have bad decision-making skills and low impulse control and unpredictable behaviors. So you should not depend upon them for anything. All right, they're too erratic. You should not be making any commitments or obligations with people who are like that. Especially because, and this leads me to the next thing, which is that sociopaths are completely solipsistic and self-centered and self-serving. Everything is always going to be about them. They are only going to act with their self-interest in mind and never anyone else's. They are only ever going to be concerned with getting what they want and never on reciprocating, unless they can use that to leverage getting even more from you afterwards. The law of reciprocity, as we've been taught in business classes, doesn't apply to sociopaths. You can expect them to do nothing but take and never give back unless they are going to use that as leverage for you to then keep doing more for them. They are also extremely unreliable because of the fact that they are only out for themselves, and they are so solipsistic and self-centered. They basically live in a bubble, right? And they're not going to have any regard for you unless you are in front of them. So this is why they oftentimes can not be depended upon to meet their obligations or keep a schedule, even, show up where they say they're going to. And the next sign of a sociopath is that they refuse to take responsibility for their problems. They will have zero accountability unless they can somehow use that accountability to gain credit. But otherwise, they will always make excuses and throw someone else under the bus for their own mistakes. They do not care who they hurt for their own self-preservation or success. They refuse to admit when they are wrong. So they almost never learn from their mistakes. And anytime you take an issue with something that they do or find fault with them, they will turn it around on you by either blaming you for something else, passing the blame for that to you, or just taking issue with the fact that you are blaming them for it at all and get mad at you for bringing it up. How dare you accuse them of something like that? Why are you trying to guilt trip them? Something we've all heard from women, right? Or something like that. You see, this leads me to the next thing, which is that they have problems with authority and just a rebellious, defiant nature and a tendency towards disobedience and disagreeableness. All right, sociopaths are a more disagreeable type. So they will tend to defy authority figures and rebel against rules. They are the mischievous, troublemaking types because they hate having rules imposed upon them. It makes them feel less powerful than they want to feel, which is all-powerful. And anything that makes them feel less powerful than all-powerful, they won't be able to tolerate. They are obsessed with status, power, money, and acquiring these things. The phrase sociopathic social climber refers to how they will do anything, including stepping on and over anyone in their way in order to ascend to fame and fortune. Even if those people they're stepping on are close friends, family, and other loved ones, such as lovers. Their path to success is paved by the blood, sweat, and tears of others, especially those close to them. And they are extremely competitive and aggressive in competition because they have this primal need to win for self-validation. And when it comes to dating for them is a game that they know how to play very well. They are the predatory types. For women, they're financial predators. They're the gold diggers who know what it takes to succeed with men and get what they want out of them. They treat their dating life the same way they treat their professional life, like a business, which is done for profit and profit alone, in which they're able to use business skills to succeed at. And as a consequence of this system, they treat their dates like they are just numbers, because that is what they are to them. This is partly due to the next thing, which is that they have intimacy issues. And that's why a lot of women will get intimate sexually with a guy instantly, the same night as meeting him, because intimacy with them is shallow. You'll never get any deeper than that, all right? Unless they want to create an illusion of deep intimacy with you, which they can and often will do for their manipulative purposes. And this is one of the ways that sociopaths, especially narcissistic sociopathic women, use their sexuality to manipulate men is through instant intimacy and the illusion that that intimacy is deep and meaningful, like that you are soulmates and that you aren't just having sex, you are making love and your souls are merging together, when in actuality, you two do not have some sort of special ultimate monogamous pair bond. All right, these are promiscuous people. Sociopaths are promiscuous and prone to sexual addiction and sexual deviance and risky sexual behaviors such as spreading STDs. And they have very superficial, shallow sex lives, though they can make someone think that you have a very special sexual bond and that you are soulmates, even when there is really nothing meaningful actually there, and the connection is empty and soulless as they are, right? It is just seduction, okay? Because they are extremely sexual and thus extremely well-practiced and good at the skill of sex and seduction, and using their sexual skills to get what they want as well. They can make you feel like you have great chemistry and will give you great sexual pleasure, but everything they are doing sexually is not being done for you. It's being done for them. And ultimately, you may come to find that they turn out to be a very selfish lover in actuality. Or even if they are very giving lovers, sexually speaking, it is all being done with a hidden agenda in mind. It is something that they are doing with the law of reciprocity in mind, or as leverage to try to get something from you, or part of some greater game that they are playing with you. Or even if it seems like it is being done for the sake of connection and intimacy, it's because they want to establish that connection and intimacy with you so that they can begin to use you. All right. These are the types of people who will come on to someone and make you feel like you have something special together, and that they don't want you for any sort of superficial reasons like money. But as soon as you have gotten married, it turns out that they do. And these are the types of people who might seduce someone who they work with and then file sexual harassment charges and extort that person, or have sex with someone and purposely get themselves pregnant against that person's will and try to entrap them with the pregnancy and extort them out of child support. These are the types of people you are dealing with sexually when you fuck a sociopath. And it really sucks when they make you think that they have feelings for you and then make you have feelings for them through this emotional and sexual seduction, which hardly any man can resist the thought of. I mean, like, we all just want a woman who is going to love us and take care of us emotionally and physically, and make us feel good, because most of the time in our lives, we feel probably, very stressed and uncomfortable. So, of course, it's easy to be seduced by a woman who makes love to us emotionally and physically. But unfortunately, sociopathic women are sexual predators and gold diggers, aka financial predators, who use their sex to extort money from men. So you cannot fuck them. There's no way to guarantee your safety from that 100%. And in romantic relationships, they will come on strong and move the relationship fast and follow the same sort of narcissistic pattern of codependence, basically making you fall in love with them, getting what they want from you, and then leaving you to monkey branch like the hypergamous sociopathic social climber she is. In fact, a sociopathic gold digger might get married multiple times in her lifetime and amass quite a fortune doing so. And if they do something to hurt you in a romantic relationship, these are the types of people who you can't stay mad at, because they can manipulate your feelings so well. Not only do they know how to play with people's emotions and are very skilled at it, but they enjoy doing so as well. They love playing mind games with others and are quite masterful at them, including gaslighting and even psychological warfare. So making you fall in love with them and then fucking with you and turning you into their little bitch is easy for them. They've done it with plenty of men before. The first sign this is going to happen is when a woman shit tests you. You should turn and run as soon as this happens, because these people may actually enjoy creating states of emotional distress in others and manipulating their emotions until they create mental health problems. They get off on having that power over someone. And this again is a form of sadism, and another way these all go together. These people are often adept at manipulation and gaslighting, and to make you doubt your own reality and go insane, and will enjoy themselves doing so. Sociopaths are also obsessed with power and control. They are control freaks and need to be the one in power and control in any situation where they get anxious. They are very domineering because they cannot stand the thought of being powerless. It is a fear of theirs that makes them worry of what could go wrong. So they tend to take control of and dominate any situation, and then use their control for their own agenda, even if it is not in the best interest of everyone else involved, or rather the opposite. Sociopaths are the types of dominant personalities who are always taking over, only to then abuse their power in the situation. They are the most corruptible people and have no ethics or morals. They just do not have the intellectual capacity for it because of the fact that their empathy centers are not active enough. And that leads me to the next thing, which is that they also have very low emotional intelligence and emotional maturity. And deep down, they are actually extremely wounded, traumatized people who became this way as a defense mechanism. So You may notice that while they act unemotional and cold for the most part, sometimes, something once in a while will hit a nerve of theirs and cause them to react very harshly, perhaps even lash out or blow up. And the saying hurt people is a truism here. All right, basically, trauma produces sociopaths who then, hurt others and traumatize them. And sociopaths can often have very poor emotional control and anger issues and problems with drama and acting out, breaking things, scaring people, getting into fights, and other types of extreme behaviors such as being prone to verbal abuse and harassment and assault as well. And they can tend to be psychopathic at times, which is the higher end of the ASPD spectrum, where it becomes more violent and physically dangerous. So while a sociopath is on the other side of the spectrum, where they are more verbally aggressive and abusive, and tend to harm others emotionally or their livelihood in business or politics, things like that are destructive antisocial behaviors. Psychopaths are more physically harmful and violent and dangerous towards others. Okay, so a sociopath is like a non-violent psychopath. A psychopath is like a violent sociopath. They are both two different sides of the coin or the spectrum of ASPD. All right, so a psychopath is much more dangerous in that these are the types of people who could actually take your life, as I described having a neighbor which ended up turning out to be one, and I was the only one in the community who saw the red flags that told me to stay away from this guy, and someone who didn't lost his life. So what are psychopathic behaviors that we need to watch out for? Well, remember how I talked about the look in the sociopath's eye? Let's talk about what I call the psychopathic glare. This is when you look into the eyes and you can see the madness inside of them. Now, women will often mask this by doing their makeup in such a way, or using their look in a seductive way, and thus they can make their crazy eyes look more like sexy eyes. But make sure you don't let that seduce you, okay? Don't stick your dick in crazy. If a woman has sexy eyes that are also crazy looking, you should still run, okay? Run from the crazy sexy eyes. So watch out for that psychopathic glare. You'll be able to see in their eyes that they do not look upon you with humanity. They're not going to treat you with any kind of human decency. If there are people who are prone to raising their voice to like inappropriate levels, yelling or screaming, that is a psychopathic behavioral red flag right there. Or something that we men have had to deal with a lot from women that is a typical female behavior is extreme drama and hysteria. That's often going to be paired with the screaming. You need to watch out for that, or any kind of verbal abuse that gets to a certain extreme or involves actual like name calling or statements of like degradation that you could potentially call slander or harassment even by law. And also a very psychopathic behavior is when someone tries to break down someone else's sense of identity or even their self-esteem and to attempt to cause them mental health problems, right? Such as extreme forms of gaslighting and emotional manipulation and abuse, or certain forms of psychological warfare or psychological child abuse. These are all psychopathic behaviors, right? Because any attempt to cause mental health problems to someone is very destructive to them. And so that requires a complete lack of empathy and humanity. But let's talk more about their physical side, since that is really what definitively makes them psychopaths and not sociopaths. There's going to be things such as breaking things and destruction of property, pounding of fists to the point of breaking something, right? Or lashing out and actually knocking things over or casting them aside and breaking them, or maybe even throwing them across the room, or potentially throwing things at you, right? Flipping a table at you or breaking something in a way that makes you feel intimidated or even attacked. or even threatening with physical harm, if there are verbal and physical means of intimidation, or perhaps weapon wielding. That is a psychopathic red flag right there. Or maybe if they're not directing their attacks or abuse directly at you, but they could be abusive towards an animal, like a family pet or something like that. But then, of course, certainly any hitting or physical abuse is psychopathic behavior, and that includes all forms of physical striking and abuse, all right, including any slapping or scratching, things that, again, are typical female behaviors that men generally do not do, all right? And then there's forms of pushing, okay? If you're using your size to push someone, your body or your shoulder to push someone, or actually pushing them in order to get them to, bump into something else, to bang against the wall or back against the wall, or maybe knock them over, that counts as physical abuse, which is psychopathic behavior. Or if you start grappling with someone or engaging in what we would call a physical altercation, anything like that, these all qualify as physical abuse. If you are laying your hands on someone in a way that qualifies as striking, or is, violent in some way, or uncomfortable or harmful physically, or threatening or intimidating, these all qualify as physical abuse, which are psychopathic behaviors. And psychopathy also will generally manifest with other symptoms of mental illness, such as insanity, paranoid delusions, a loss of the sense of objective reality, delirium, madness, and senility, or bipolar disorder, or borderline personality disorder, or just emotional extremes, mood swings and hysteria and such, which is common among women. You can look up the origin of the word hysteria if you want. It's very misogynistic. And then psychopaths also have other types of extreme behavioral tendencies, such as drug addiction and criminal behaviors such as stealing, robbery, extortion, loan sharking, blackmail, con artistry, and other types of criminal transactions where someone is basically forcing someone to give them money in exchange for nothing in a way that is unethical or detrimental to their livelihood and well-being. These all qualify as psychopathic behaviors. And then sexually, psychopathic behaviors are anything sexually predatory, any sort of sexual predation, including the ones committed by women who often prey upon their male students and, prey upon men financially. Being a financial predator can at times be psychopathic. But generally what we're referring to as psychopathic sexual behaviors are predatory behaviors such as non-consensual sex acts, right? Things such as BDSM, when done without consent, is technically sexual assault, right? And thus it is similar to someone who's just, raping a woman, right? So any type of sexual assault or rape, that is all psychopathic sexual behavior. And then, of course, murder. Obviously, all murderers are psychopaths, like my former neighbor. So basically, to sum it up again, sociopaths and psychopaths are both people who have ASPD, whereas sociopaths are on one side of the spectrum and are non-violent or less violent. Psychopaths are violent and physically dangerous people. And whichever you're dealing with, there are going to be these red flags that will tell you who they are. So make sure you pay attention and protect yourself from these people, because they will only bring you harm. And as soon as you notice any of these red flags, just turn and run for your fucking life. Because you don't know if this is the person who is going to throw you under the bus figuratively, or someone who may actually fucking kill you. I literally, again, had a neighbor who I once noticed these red flags in, so I dissociated from him. And later I witnessed him committing a crime against another neighbor, slashing his tires. So I reported it to the police. And then a year later, a detective followed up with me because he had committed another crime that they wanted to talk to me about, based on the fact that in my first report that I'd filed with the police on the slashing of the tires, I had noted some of the strange behaviors and red flags I had noticed in him. And it turned out that he had actually murdered someone who he was recently hanging out with. And I had said in my initial report that I had noticed antisocial behaviors and signs of mental illness in him. And so then a court investigator called me because she said I was the only one who they've talked to who could indicate any of these things. And so the inability to notice these signs got someone killed, and no one else in the community was able to see that this guy wasn't safe to be around. So you have to make sure you know what to look for, and luckily now you do. And you need to make sure you use this information to be socially proactive and protect yourself and run at the sight of red flags, because sociopaths and psychopaths are not safe to be around. So just to make sure, check out the other video that I did on the topic of how to detect a psychopath, which comes from my Psychology channel and is linked below, as well as all of the other pertinent videos that I have provided for you. And then finally, in the next and last video on the Dark Quadrad series, I'm going to be talking about those who are even worse than psychopaths, and who psychopaths often are as well. These are the most evil people in the world: sadists. Those who turn the Dark Triad into the Dark Quadrad. But that concludes this talk. I hope I mansplained that well enough for you guys out there. Thanks for listening. Be sure to share your own thoughts and opinions and stories of any sociopaths or psychopaths that you have dealt with before by commenting below. And if you like this video, be sure to hit that like button and share these messages with everyone by sharing the video on social media and talking about these things too. And lastly, check out the links in the description below for other resources for your masculine personal development, living the life you want to as an independent man. And if you can afford to donate, please do so with the PayPal link below, because your support funds me doing this work and fighting the good fight for men like you. And then you can stay tuned for the next video coming out soon, which will be on sadism, and make sure you're subscribed so you'll be notified when that is. And until then, take care of yourselves, men, because no woman out there is going to.